Hello and welcome to my channel, I Went to Lose Gaming. After a much needed vacation at the Golden Apple Archipelagos, we are finally able to obtain the brand new 4-star catalyst, the Dodoco Tales. Let's start off with the basics. You can obtain the Dodoco Tales by participating in the last part of this event. It is available in the event shop. This is another one of those 4-star event weapons that we are able to get to Refinement 5, completely for free. As for its stats, at level 90 it has 454 base attack, 55.1% attack as its secondary stat. Its main selling point, however, is its ability, where when a normal attack hits the opponent, charge attack damage is increased by 32%, and when a charge attack hits an opponent, your attack is increased by 16%. Each buff has a 6-second duration. During this event, there is also a discount for enhancing this weapon, and it's a pretty significant discount, saving you up to 200 mythical enhancement ores and 201,000 Mora. For this video's damage showcase, I will be comparing it to my Refinement 2 Skyward Atlas. I have also consumed some crit rate food to make my crit rate 100%. This way, it removes that element of RNG. Let's first see what kind of numbers these two weapons are outputting. For the Skyward Atlas's sparked charged attacks, they are doing 16,185 damage each. The first hit of Klee's normal attacks are doing 5,969 damage. Now let's take a look at the Dodoco Tales. First, let's take a look at this clip. This clip answered whether or not the attack buff from connecting a charge attack happens for the charge attack that procs it, and the answer is no. For Klee's first spark charge attack, she did 15,190 damage. For her second spark charge attack, she did 16,075 damage. As we can see, the attack buff from her charge attack happens after the first charge attack. Klee's first hit of her normal attack is doing 4,868 damage and 5,152 damage before and after her charge attack respectively. As it is in this example, the Dodoco Tales is performing very similarly to a Refinement 2 Skyward Atlas. This is an incredible feat for a completely free-to-play weapon. But now let's let these two clips play out. Both of these weapons KO'd our poor plant friend in nearly the same amount of time. Of course, this was with only charge attacks and normal attacks, which does favor the Dodoco Tales. But another point that I'll be making is that this closeness between the two weapons can be overcome by some execution differences and RNG. It's important to note that this N1 ratio actually represents the damage ratio for all sources of damage that are not charge attacks. As such, this is the ratio for her normal attacks, her elemental skill, and her elemental burst. So for my current Klee setup, all damage sources that are not the charge attack, the Dodoco Tales does between 82 and 86% of the amount of damage that the Skyward Atlas is doing. But still, the charge attacks from the Dodoco Tales is doing between 94 and 99% of the Skyward Atlas. Now let's quickly take a look at this fight against the Primo Geo Vishap. Against this Primo Geo Vishap, we will be using Zhongli's shield as usual, but we'll also be using a lot of elemental skills and Klee's elemental burst. So after watching this fight, you may end up thinking that the Dodoco Tales is better than the Skyward Atlas, but No, that's not the point here. And because this is just my first runs with each of these weapons, I wanted to reinforce the point that execution and RNG is actually the key factors to close the gap between the two weapons. Of course, if I ended up doing 10 or 20 runs with both weapons, it's much more likely that the fastest time for the Skyward Atlas would be a bit faster than the Dodoco Tales. But in my opinion, these two weapons are so close in practice that execution and RNG are the much more important variables for which weapon ends up on top. Now let's take a look at some more concrete math with damage maximized numbers. As usual, my numbers are damage maximized. I wrote an algorithm that shuffles around substats and main stats until it finds the optimal stat combination to maximize damage for a specific character, weapon, or artifact combination. So here's the full chart with Refinement 5 whale weapons as usual. And here is a more condensed chart that we'll be looking at in more detail with the information that we actually want to see. Although this chart was made for charge attack damage, I also ranked the Dodoco Tales for other sources of damage as well. As we can see, these numbers are very similar to our earlier in-game numbers. Keep in mind that my earlier comparisons had a Refinement 2 Skyward Atlas, as well as different artifact substat distributions, which can definitely affect how these two weapons rank accordingly to each other. Anyway, we can see that for charge attack damage, the Dodoco Tales is an extremely good weapon. But for other sources of damage, the Dodoco Tales does fall behind a bit, but is still a very performant weapon, being better than the majority of other 4-star weapons. But unfortunately, if both of its buffs are down, it's not a great weapon, but let's be real, it's going to be very easy to keep both of these buffs with pretty much any DPS Catalyst user that you'd want to use this on. Speaking of which, that's the perfect segue for which Catalyst users should you use this on. Of course, Klee comes to mind immediately from both a thematic and functional purpose. But so do all charge attack focused Catalyst users, which include Klee, Yanfei, and Ningguang. These characters are, in my opinion, the best candidates for this weapon, as all three of their charge attacks do a lot of damage. However, all the Catalyst users can benefit from this weapon. If you're a hipster and you have a DPS Barbara, the Dodoco Tales is a perfectly good weapon for her as well. If you have a main DPS Mona, the Dodoco Tales is also a great weapon for her. Finally, we have Sucrose and Lisa, who are, in my opinion, better with Elemental Mastery now, thanks to the Elemental Mastery buffs. But I'm sure the Dodoco Tales will be fine on them as well if you're going for raw elemental damage instead of reaction damage. And do you remember the chart from earlier? Well, the overall rankings will barely change between all these characters, perhaps shifting some weapons a couple percentage points here and there at most. So that's why I didn't bother making another chart for each of the characters, because regardless of which Catalyst user you're using for raw elemental damage, these weapon rankings will be roughly the same. But now let's go ahead and take this thing for a test run through Abyss 12 with Klee. Klee's teammates will include Bennett, Venti with the Windbloom Ode, and Mona with the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers. Immediately we can see that damage is not the issue with my Klee and the Thrilling Tales. Now admittingly, the constellations across all my characters helped tremendously in this showcase, so please keep that in mind and understand that unless you're rocking as many constellations and as good artifacts as I am, your Klee with the Dodoco Tales probably won't be doing this well. However, the point that this weapon is still an amazing free-to-play weapon still stands. And let's say I use my Refinement 5 Lost Prayer of the Sacred Winds or Refinement 2 Skyward Atlas from earlier, the results of these runs would barely be any different, perhaps saving a couple seconds here or there. Although admittingly, 12.3 is the place where more damage more quickly would have been better. And for example, if I use my Refinement 5 Widsith here instead, quite a bit of time could have been saved taking out the Abyss Lector. But even with the Dodoco Tales, this entire Abyss 12 was a piece of cake. So now for my opinion on whether or not you should build this weapon. Yes. The only situation where I personally would not build this weapon is if you have the Lost Prayer, the Skyward Atlas, and perhaps the Widsith as well, and you don't really plan to use this weapon on any of your Catalyst users, then I guess I wouldn't build it. Otherwise, I highly recommend investing into this weapon. Not to mention that during this event, it is so much cheaper to bring this up to level 90 in comparison to one of the aforementioned 5-star catalysts. The Dodoco Tales is, in my opinion, the best free-to-play weapon to date, but there are a couple more weaknesses for this weapon that I wanted to quickly mention. If you factor in more attack percent party buffs, like from the Noblesse Oblige, Tenacity of the Millilith, Pyroresonance, etc., the damage difference for the Dodoco Tales widens a bit, in comparison to higher base attack weapons, like the Skyward Atlas and the Lost Prayer. Nonetheless, the Dodoco Tales is an amazing free-to-play weapon. What do you guys think about the Dodoco Tales? Are you going to be building it? I regularly make Genshin Impact videos ranging from C0 showcases, DPS showdowns, guides like this one, and more. So be sure to smash that subscribe button, as it's the best and easiest way for you to support my work. And I'd really appreciate it if you liked the video and left a comment as well for the YouTube algorithm. As always, thanks for watching. This is I Went to Lose, signing out.